Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Cleveland, Ohio. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has declared a 3-month state of emergency after last week's failed military coup. Over the past 3 days, tens of thousands of public employees, including soldiers, police officers, and teachers, have been fired. Some have been arrested in the Turkish capital of Ankara. Erdogan's supporters said they welcome the decision.
If Tayyip Erdogan deemed the state of emergency necessary, it should be the best option. Hopefully, we will overcome this under his leadership. We do not have any fear or reservations about the state of emergency. Life continues in Turkey, so does our demonstrations for democracy at night. God willing, this period will continue under the leadership of our Commander-in-Chief.
U.S. airstrikes on a town in northern Syria killed at least 73 civilians Tuesday. The monitoring group Air Wars says it's the deadliest U.S. airstrike for civilians to date since the U.S. began strikes in Syria in 2014. A U.S.-supported militia called the Syrian Democratic Forces began an assault on the town of Manbij at the end of May. Since then, groups that monitor the war say at least 190 civilians have been killed in U.S. airstrikes in the town. The U.S. military said it's investigating the incident. Until earlier this year, the Pentagon claimed no civilians had been killed in its air campaign against ISIS, while at the same time claiming more than 20,000 ISIS fighters had been killed. Here in Cleveland, Wednesday marked the third day of the Republican National Convention. Indiana Governor Mike Pence formally accepted the nomination to be Trump's running mate.
I am deeply humbled by your confidence, and on behalf of my family, here and gone, I accept your nomination to run and serve as Vice President of the United States of America.
But the New York Times is reporting Donald Trump actually wanted Ohio Governor John Kasich to be his running mate, and that Kasich declined. According to the Times, Donald Trump's son, Donald Jr., called Kasich's advisor asking if the governor wanted to be, quote, the most powerful vice president in history, unquote, promising Kasich would be in charge of both domestic and foreign policy. Donald Trump Jr. reportedly said his father's role as president would be simply making America great again. Trump's campaign disputes this account and denies it wanted Kasich over Pence. Ohio Governor Kasich has not come to the convention, even though it's being held in his own state, and he's been in Cleveland this week. Ultimately, the Trump campaign ended up picking Governor Mike Pence. Last night, during his speech, Pence said, quote, "We cannot have 4 more years of apologizing to our enemies and abandoning our friends. Donald Trump will rebuild our military and stand with our allies," he said. But Donald Trump directly contradicted Pence during an interview with the New York Times Wednesday. Trump said he would break with long-standing U.S. foreign policy by not automatically defending NATO allies from attacks. Instead, Trump says he'd only help NATO allies if they have, quote, fulfilled their obligations to us, unquote. We'll have more on Indiana Governor Mike Pence, the man who may become the most powerful vice president in history, after headlines. Meanwhile, last night at the RNC, Governor Pence was overshadowed by Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who refused to officially endorse Donald Trump.
If you love our country and love your children as much as I know that you do, stand and speak and vote your conscience. Vote for candidates up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom and to be faithful to the Constitution.
That's the crowd booing last night at the RNC as Ted Cruz refused to endorse Donald Trump. Cruz's wife, Heidi Cruz, had to be escorted out by security as she was heckled by the pro-Trump delegates who shouted Goldman Sachs. Heidi Cruz is a managing director at the private equity firm. After Cruz's speech, delegates expressed outrage.
Those 1-2 sentences is all we needed. And instead, he did this. Vote your conscience, did a mic drop and walked out. And what it really was a big middle finger to this entire convention. And Ted Cruz, tonight, just set the United States up to be ruled by that corrupt woman, crooked Hillary Clinton, just so he can set himself up to be president in 4 years. There probably won't even be a Republican Party in 4 years.
Attendees at the Republican National Convention are overwhelmingly white. That's according to the Republican Party's own data, which says out of nearly 2,500 delegates, only 18 are African American. Statistics compiled by the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies show that's the fewest number of delegates at the RNC in at least a century. One of the few African American delegates at the RNC this year spoke out.
A delegate is a delegate is a delegate, and that's truly all that matters. Hopefully for the next time around, we'll have more African-American delegates and people of color. However, right now, it's really about Americans.
This comes as Donald Trump has an approval rating among African-Americans in Ohio of 0%. This, according to a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll, which also found Trump has a 0% approval rating among African Americans in Pennsylvania as well. While the RNC has been marked by intense anger against Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, with many chanting lock her up during speeches, one Trump advisor has called for her to be executed. New Hampshire State Representative Al Baldessaro made the comments while speaking on the conservative Boston radio show, The Kuhner Report.
This whole thing disgusts me. Hillary Clinton should be put on the firing line and shot for treason.
Al Baldessaro advises Donald Trump on veteran issues. The Secret Service is investigating him for his comments. Reuters is reporting New Jersey Governor Chris Christie says Donald Trump would purge the federal government of all Obama-appointed officials if he wins the presidency. Christie's the head of Trump's White House transition team. He reportedly said in a closed-door meeting, quote, "As you know from his other career, Donald likes to fire people," unquote. Meanwhile, Reuters is also reporting Donald Trump is considering nominating a fracking tycoon to be energy secretary if elected president. Harold Hamm is the CEO of the billion-dollar oil and gas company Continental Energy. Protests continue outside the RNC. On Wednesday, hundreds of people gathered to erect a wall against Trump, blocking the entrance to the convention center with a massive cloth banner painted like a wall. This is Ava Cardenas.
We are going to be walling of hate, xenophobia, and we're going to continue our pledge to protect our communities from people in positions of power who do not look out for the benefit of all of us as a community. Today, we are drawing a line in the sand to demand respect for our communities and to ask for folks that are stepping on the sidelines, not knowing what they should do, to come and join us and to start walling of hate in their communities, to start protecting their people, because we as a community know the solutions. No one else is going to do it for us. So this is a call to action, but also a message to Trump and anyone that feels like using xenophobia and hate as a means of power. That's not the solution, and we're going to be here and continue to fight.
Meanwhile, at least 17 people were arrested during another demonstration outside the RNC after a protester attempted to burn an American flag. Burning American flags is legal under most circumstances. Police use horses to try to break up the protest. Another shocking video of a police shooting of an African-American man has emerged. It happened Monday in North Miami, Florida. Police shot an unarmed man in the leg as he was helping an autistic man who had wandered away from a group home. Social worker Charles Kinsey is seen lying on the ground with his hands in the air when police shoot him. Police have said they were responding to a 911 call about a man with a gun. But in the cell phone video that was released yesterday, Kinsey can be heard telling police as he lay on the ground, his arms outstretched, quote, "All he has is a toy truck, a toy truck. I am a behavioral therapist at a group home," he said. Listen carefully. The behavioral therapist Kinsey can also be heard on the video trying to calm down the autistic man and said he was more worried about his patient's safety than his own. The video does not show the moment the shots are fired, and Kinsey said officers offered no explanation. Meanwhile, Black Lives Matter activists launched protests in multiple cities Wednesday, including in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Detroit. In New York City, 10 people were arrested after activists locked themselves to each other using PVC pipe at the entrance of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. In Detroit, 6 people were arrested at a protest outside a police precinct. The protest was remembering Ayanna Stanley Jones, a 7-year-old girl who was killed in her own home in 2010 during a night raid by police that was being filmed by a reality TV show. In Washington, D.C., activists with Black Youth Project 100 and Black Lives Matter locked themselves to the steps of the National Legislative Office of the Fraternal Order of Police. The activists were demanding police officers stop paying dues to the private union, which they say defends officers accused of brutality. And the author of a best-selling book about his imprisonment at Guantanamo Bay may be freed. Mohamedou Ould-Slahi is a Mauritanian citizen and author of Guantanamo Diary. Slahi has been imprisoned at Guantanamo for nearly 14 years without charge. The prison's review board has now declared he is no longer a, quote, continuing significant threat to the security of the United States, unquote. 77 prisoners remain at Guantanamo nearly 8 years after President Obama first moved to close the prison. And a correction on Monday and Tuesday's show, we inaccurately reported Florida Congressman Dennis Ross is planning to skip the RNC, saying, quote, it's a good time to be fishing in Montana. In fact, Ross is not attending the convention, but the quote was actually the words of Montana Senator Steve Daines, who said in an interview with Politico, but then ended up coming to the RNC on Tuesday. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Breaking with Convention. This is war, peace, and the presidency. We are broadcasting from the Republican National Convention, broadcasting inside and out from the streets to the convention floor. I'm Amy Goodman.